The moment Morrigan stepped into the great hall, the entire atmosphere changed. The air became heavy, oppressive, charged with an ancient power that made even the strongest wolves instinctively want to flee. Her presence was like a storm about to break a euro, devastating and inevitable. She was beautiful in the same way that Era was beautiful, with the same dark hair and gray eyes, but where Era's gaze held innocence and hope, Morrigan's eyes burned with centuries of rage and obsession. She wore robes that seemed to shimmer between black and silver, adorned with symbols that glowed with an inner light. At her back was a sword forged from moonlight itself, and in her other hand, she held a staff carved from ancient bone. Behind her came dozens of warriors euro, rogue wolves in human form, their eyes burning with amber and gold, their loyalty to this ancient woman absolute. They spread through the hall with practiced efficiency, surrounding the noble houses, blocking the exits, making their intentions clear. No one was leaving, and no one was fighting their way out. "I am Morrigan of the Voice Walker bloodline," she announced, her voice echoing through the hall as though it came from the very stones themselves. "For 200 years, I have waited. For 200 years, I have prepared. And now, at last, my bloodline has awakened." Thane stepped forward, his body already beginning to shift. His eyes burned gold as his beast clawed toward the surface, desperate to protect his mate and his kingdom. "Stand down," Morrigan commanded, her voice carrying the weight of ancient magic. "The Alpha King has no power here. None of you do." And in that moment, every wolf in the hall felt a pressure that held them in place, that made movement nearly impossible. The ancient magic was so powerful, so absolute, that even Thane couldn't break free of it. Era, however, felt something different. The bond between her and Thane burned like fire in her consciousness. Through it, she could sense his desperation, his fury, his determination to protect her. And she realized something fundamental: the binding ritual had awakened more than just her wolf. It had awakened her power the true power of the Voice Walker bloodline. She stepped forward, out from behind Thane's protective form, and looked directly at the woman who claimed to be her aunt. "I know you," Era said, her voice quiet but absolute. "You've been in my mind since I was born." The whispers. The voices. "That was you, wasn't it? You were calling to me all this time." Morrigan's expression shifted, surprise flickering across her ancient face. "Yes, little bloodline. I have been calling to you. I have been preparing you, teaching you, building you into what you were always meant to be. And now, you are finally ready to fulfill your destiny." "And what destiny is that?" Era asked, stepping closer. She could feel the power building in her chest, could sense the wolf inside her stirring, beginning to wake. "To rule," Morrigan said simply. "The Voice Walkers were the first wolves. We created reality with our songs. We shaped the world with our will. And then we were imprisoned by the other packs, forced into hiding, our power stripped away. I have spent 2 centuries plotting to restore what was taken from us. And you, Era, are the key. You are the one who will sing the kingdom into a new form a form where the Voice Walkers rule and all others serve." "No," Era said, and as she spoke that single word, something shifted in the hall. The pressure that Morrigan had created began to crack. "I will not be part of your revenge. I will not use my power to conquer or control. I will know to." The transformation began. It started in Era's chest, a burning that spread outward through her entire body. Her bones began to crack and reform, her muscles tore and rebuilt themselves. The pain was indescribable 1,000 times worse than any normal transformation. It was as though every cell in her body was being unmade and remade, as though she was being torn apart and put back together by forces beyond her comprehension. She screamed, a sound that was partly human and partly something else entirely. The scream echoed through the hall and seemed to make the very stones tremble. "No!" Morrigan cried out, and for the first time, Era heard genuine fear in her aunt's voice. "You are transforming too early. The ritual is not complete. But Morrigan didn't understand. The transformation wasn't being controlled by her. It was being driven by the bond between Era and Thane, by the ancient magic of the binding ritual, by Era's own will and determination. Thane, freed from Morrigan's hold by the power of Era's awakening, shifted into his wolf form. His massive black body moved with liquid grace, positioning himself between his mate and her aunt. He let out a roar that shook the very foundation of the castle, a sound that declared his absolute determination to protect her. The rogue wolves that Morrigan had brought with her hesitated. They looked at each other, confused, unsure whether to follow their leader's commands or respect the primal authority of the Alpha King's roar. It was the moment they needed. The guards of Shadowmere Castle, freed from the supernatural pressure that had held them in place, began to fight back. They moved with practiced efficiency, engaging the rogue wolves in combat. Steel clashed with fangs. Magic met strength. The hall erupted into chaos and violence. But through it all, Era continued to transform. Her human form convulsed one final time. Her bones snapped and reformed. Her skin rippled and shifted. And then, all at once, the pain stopped. She stood on four powerful legs in the center of the hall, and the world looked different. Sharper. Clearer. The sounds of the battle became distinct and separated. She could hear each individual growl, each snarl, each clash of bodies with perfect clarity. Her senses, heightened to an almost superhuman degree, picked up on details that human eyes could never perceive. She looked down at her paws and saw silver fury, not pure silver, but a deep, shimmering silver that seemed to hold the light of the moon itself. Her fur rippled and moved like liquid starlight, and when she looked at her reflection in a polished shield lying on the ground, she gasped at what she saw. Her wolf form was beautiful beyond measure. She was smaller than Thane, but sleeker, more agile. And there was something else, a faint aura of light that surrounded her entire body, visible only to those with the ability to see magic. It was the mark of the Voice Walker, the signature of ancient power. She was no longer wolfless. She was no longer broken. She was finally, completely, entirely herself. And her wolf knew only one thing: her mate was in danger, and her familiar, the kingdom that had rejected her, the pack that had mocked her, was under attack. Era let out a howl that made the very stones of the castle tremble. It was different than Thane's roar, not the sound of fury or dominance, but the sound of ancient magic, of power that predated the modern world. It was the howl of a voice walker, and every wolf in the castle, friend and foe alike, felt the weight of it. The rogue wolves immediately fell silent, their heads turning toward the sound of that primal cry. Some of them dropped their weapons. Some fell to their knees, their instincts telling them to submit to this creature of ancient power. Even Morrigan froze, her expression transforming from rage to something that looked almost like awe. "Impossible," she whispered. "Your wolf has awakened. But it shouldn't be so powerful. It shouldn't be so pure." Era moved toward her aunt, her silver wolf body flowing like liquid across the stone floor of the hall. She was smaller than Morrigan's true wolf form would be, but she moved with a confidence and grace that belied her smaller size. And she could hear the wolves calling to her, not just the ones in the castle, but the wild ones in the forest beyond the walls, the ancient voices in the north, the ancestral whispers that had been guiding her all along. "Come to us," they called. Join us. Let us fight beside you. Let us show your enemies what true power is, But Era didn't call them. She knew what she had to do. She opened her mouth and sang. It wasn't a howl, and it wasn't a scream. It was something in between, a sound that carried words and meaning and emotion in a way that normal wolf speech never could. She sang to the rogue packs, spoke to them in the language of the voice walkers, the language of the ancient ones. "Go home," she sang to them. Return to your territories. Leave this kingdom. I hear your pain, your hunger, your need for vengeance. But this is not the way. This is not your fight, asterisk. But the Alpha King is your enemy, the rogue wolves tried to argue, their thoughts pushing back against her voice. Asterisk, he has wronged your people. He has taken your lands, asterisk. No, Era sang, and her voice was gentle but absolute. Asterisk, you are confused. You have been led astray. The one you should be angry at is the one who brought you here, the one who promised you victory and power but only wants to use you for her own purposes. Morrigan has lied to you. She has deceived you. She cares nothing for your freedom, asterisk. And as Era sang, something miraculous happened. The rogue wolves began to withdraw. Not all of Themyuro, a few continued to fight, too far gone in bloodlust or too thoroughly enslaved by Morrigan's magic to hear reason. But most of them began to back away, to lower their heads, to acknowledge the authority of the Voice Walker's song. They turned on Morrigan, recognizing her betrayal, understanding that they had been manipulated and lied to. Morrigan's composure finally shattered. She shifted into her wolf Themyuro, a massive creature with fur of pure silver, eyes burning with ancient power. She was enormous, easily the size of Thane, and there was an aura of dark magic surrounding her that made the air itself seem to distort. You think you can defeat me, she roared, her wolf form's voice carrying across the hall. I am 200 years old. I am the most powerful voice walker alive. You are just a child, fresh from your first transformation. But Era wasn't alone. Thane moved to stand beside her, his black form a perfect complement to her silver. And as they stood together, the combined presence of the Alpha King and his Luna mate created a power that was undeniable. The bond between them burned so brightly that some wolves had to look away. What followed was a battle unlike anything the castle had ever witnessed. Morrigan attacked with the ferocity of an ancient predator, her massive jaws snapping at Era, her claws tearing through the air. But Era was faster, more agile. She danced around her aunt's attacks, using her smaller size to her advantage. And when she had the opening, she sang a Euro, not the gentle song she'd used to convince the rogue wolves, but a song of power, a song of binding, a song that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth itself. The magic wrapped around Morrigan, holding her in place, freezing her in the middle of her attack. It's over, Era said, her voice carrying both sadness and finality. You sought to conquer and control. You wanted to use me to restore what was taken from you. But I will not be a weapon. I will not be a tool for revenge. And I will not allow you to hurt this kingdom anymore. She sang the binding song deeper, tighter, more absolute. And slowly, inevitably, Morrigan's wolf form began to shrink. The ancient magic that powered her, the rage and obsession that had sustained her for 2 centuries, began to dissipate. Morrigan returned to her human form, falling to her knees, defeated and broken. #### the aftermath and trials. The battle was over, but the aftermath was far from simple. Thane stood over his fallen enemy, his beast demanding vengeance, his human mind seeking justice. But Era placed herself between them, her silver form a barrier of light and power. She is to be imprisoned, Era said, her voice carrying the authority of a Luna. She will stand trial before the council. She will face judgment for her crimes. But she will not die by our hand. We are not murderers. Thane's golden eyes flickered with conflicting emotions, but finally, he bowed his head in acknowledgement of her wisdom. The guards moved in and took Morrigan into custody, binding her with chains inscribed with runes of suppression that would hold even her ancient magic. Ronan tried to escape in the chaos, but Thane intercepted him, pinning the prince against the wall with one massive paw pressed against his chest. The betrayal, the conspiracy, the alliance with Karen and the rogue Paxayuro, it was too much. Thane's eyes burned with the fury of a father betrayed by his own son. But again, Era intervened. Trial, she said simply. He faces trial like all the others. By the time the battle ended completely, the sun was setting over the Shadowmere kingdom. The castle was damaged but still standing. Many wolves were wounded, but relatively few had been killed. And most importantly, the conspiracy was revealed, the traitors were captured, and the kingdom was safe. ###the coronation. 3 weeks later, as the snow fell gently outside the castle walls and the first hints of spring began to show on the branches of the trees, Era stood in the great hall of Shadowmere, preparing for her official coronation as Luna of the kingdom. She wore a gown of white and silver, adorned with moonstone and starlight. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate braid threaded with silver ribbons and precious gems. Her fingers wore rings of power, ancient rings that had once belonged to the voice walkers of old. And when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She was no longer the broken, wolfless servant girl. She was no longer invisible or mocked. She was Luna, the most powerful female wolf in the kingdom, the mate of the Alpha King, the heir to an ancient bloodline. Thane stood waiting for her at the altar, dressed in his formal royal regalia. His crown gleamed with gold and moonstone. His tunic was embroidered with silver wolves that seemed almost alive. When he saw her, his eyes burned gold with possession and love. He took her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her fingers gently. The gesture was both tender and possessive, a declaration to the entire kingdom that she was his, completely and utterly. "My Luna," he whispered. "My mate. My everything." The ceremony was brief but profound. The council elder who had stood up for her during the battle, Aldrich, the kind healer Mr. performed the ritual, acknowledging Era's acceptance into the royal line and her union with the Alpha King. The council had initially been divided on whether to accept her as Luna. Some argued that she was still too new to her wolf form, too untested, too unknown. But when they learned of her actions during the battle, how she had used her voice to turn the tide, how she had chosen mercy over vengeance, how she had stood between an ancient enemy and complete destruction, they recognized something fundamental. Era was not just worthy of the position of Luna. She was essential to it. When the formal ceremony ended, Thane kissed her deeply, and the entire hall erupted into howls of approval. The sound echoed off the stone walls and seemed to resonate with ancient magic, as though the very kingdom was acknowledging her. As they walked down the aisle together, Era could feel the difference in how the pack treated her. The mockery was gone. The disdain had transformed into respect. The nobles who had scorned her now bowed their heads in acknowledgement of her position. ### Justice and reconciliation. The trials that followed were complicated and often painful. Karen was found guilty of conspiracy against the crown, treason, and communications with enemy forces. She was sentenced to 20 years in the dungeons of Shadowmere, stripped of her noble titles, and banished from ever holding a position of influence again. Ronan's trial was even more difficult. As the Alpha King's own son, his betrayal cut deeper than Karen's ever could. But the evidence was overwhelming. He had conspired with his stepmother to overthrow the king, had allied himself with the rogue packs, had attempted to claim Era as his mate in order to prevent her bonding with Thane. Thane, as Alpha King, had the power to execute his son. He had every right to do so. But when Era spoke before the council on Ronan's behalf, arguing for mercy, something shifted in the king's heart. Ronan was misled, Era told the council, her voice carrying the weight of the voice walker's truth. He was manipulated by a woman he thought he loved. He made terrible choices, yes. But he is still worthy of redemption. Exile him from the kingdom, yes. Strip him of his titles, yes. But do not kill him. Do not close the door to forgiveness forever. Thane's expression was anguished, torn between the demands of justice and the pleas of his mate. In the end, love won out. Ronan was exiled from the Shadowmere kingdom, stripped of all titles and lands, forbidden from ever returning on pain of death. The prince left the kingdom in disgrace, disappearing into the lands beyond, his future unknown but at least still possible. Morrigan's trial was the most intense of all. The ancient voice walker was questioned extensively about her plans, her motivations, her connections to the rogue packs. She revealed that she had spent 200 years building an army, recruiting discontented wolves from various territories, promising them power and freedom if they would help her overthrow the current order. She had targeted Era specifically because she recognized in the girl an untapped power, a voice walker bloodline that had been dormant for so long that no one in the modern world even remembered what it meant. She had thought she could control Era, could shape her, could use her as a tool for conquest. Instead, she had awakened something far greater than she could have imagined. Morrigan was sentenced to eternal imprisonment in a chamber beneath the castle, her magic suppressed by runes of binding. She would spend the rest of her days in darkness, isolated from all contact with the outside world, a living reminder of what happens when ambition and rage are allowed to fester for too long. The epilogue. 6 months later, Era stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, looking out over the Shadowmere kingdom. Spring had come, bringing with it new life and renewal. The forests were green again. The flowers bloomed in profusion. And peace had settled over the land like a benediction. Thane wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. The bond between them had only grown stronger with each passing day. What had started as a primal recognition had transformed into something deeper, a true partnership, a genuine love that grew stronger every moment. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly, his lips brushing against her ear. "Choosing me? Choosing this life? Choosing to be Luna instead of seeking revenge against those who hurt you?" "Never," Era said without hesitation. "Not for a single moment. I was always meant for this. I was always meant for you." She turned in his arms and kissed him, and in that moment, she felt the complete contentment of a wolf who had finally found her place in the world. 6 more months pass. A year after the coronation, Era discovered she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She would be bringing new life into the world, a child that would carry both the Alpha King's power and the Voice Walker's ancient magic. What would such a creature be? Would it be male or female? Would it inherit her gift for song and communication? When she told Thane, he held her and wept, tears of happiness, of relief, of the profound gratitude of a man who had found not just a mate, but a true partner, a woman who would stand beside him through anything. "Our child will change the world," he said, pressing his hand to her still flat stomach. "Just as you have changed me." 1 year, complete. As the seasons turned and the year reached its conclusion, Era found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. She was no longer the wolfless Omega girl scrubbing floors in the castle servants' quarters. She was no longer mocked or pitted or invisible. She was Luna of Shadowmere Kingdom, mate of the Alpha King, voice walker of an ancient bloodline, and soon to be mother to a child who would inherit powers beyond imagining. But more than that, she had learned something fundamental about herself, that her worth had never been determined by her status or her wolf status. That she had always been worthy, always been powerful, always been exactly who she was meant to be. The castle of Shadowmere had transformed as well. Thane had worked with Era to create new laws and traditions that honored not just strength and power, but wisdom, compassion, and the courage to choose mercy over vengeance. Wolves who had once been marginalized, those without powerful family connections, those who were different, those who didn't fit the traditional expectations of pack hierarchy, now found their place in the kingdom. Era had opened the doors to possibility for creatures who had been told their entire lives that they didn't matter. The final scene. On a beautiful evening, as the sun set over the Shadowmere Kingdom painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Era and Thane stood together on the highest tower of the castle. Below them, the kingdom spread out in all its glory, forests and rivers, villages and farmlands, wolves moving freely beneath the moonlight. Era, no longer in her human form but in her wolf form, looked out over everything they had built together. Her silver fur rippled in the evening breeze. Thane, in his wolf form beside her, let out a howl that was answered by wolves throughout the kingdom. It was a sound of contentment. A sound of peace. A sound of a kingdom at rest. "I remember," Era said softly, her voice carrying through their bond to Thane, "when I first heard your wolf's growl outside my door. I was so afraid. I thought you were going to destroy me. I thought I was going to destroy myself trying to resist you," Thane replied. "My beast knew what you were. It recognized its match, its completion. And my human mind fought against it because I couldn't believe someone like you could exist for someone like me." "And now?" Era asked. "Now," Thane said, pulling her close in the way that only wolves could, "now I understand that some things are written in the stars. That some connections transcend logic and reason and duty. That sometimes, the greatest power is not in conquering or controlling, but in choosing to love completely and absolutely." Era leaned her head against his, and they stood together in silence as the moon rose above them. The bond between them burned with a light that was almost visible, a connection that had changed both of them forever. Somewhere in the castle, the child growing in Era's womb stirred, as though it too could sense the love and power that surrounded it. The final truth. But what no one else in the kingdom yet understood was that Era's story was far from over. The Voice Walker bloodline was awakening. And with its awakening came responsibilities and powers that even Thane didn't fully comprehend. There were other ancient creatures stirring in the world. Other bloodlines that had been sleeping for centuries. Other powers that had been held in check by ancient agreements and magical bindings. And Era, with her gift for communication, her ability to hear and influence wolves across vast distances, her capacity to see into the future through the whispers of the ancient Onisa Euro, she would be the bridge between all of these worlds. The Alpha King's dog had walked away from the life that had tried to diminish her. And she had never looked back. She had found something far greater than acceptance. She had found purpose. She had found love. She had found herself. And in doing so, she had changed not just her own fate, but the fate of an entire kingdom. This epic 5-episode series has followed Era Sylvain's complete journey from a mocked, wolfless Omega to the most powerful female wolf in the kingdom. Episode breakdown. Episode 1, 1000 words, Introduction and the Alpha King's first awareness. Episode 2, 10,000 words, Public humiliation and danger approaching from the north. Episode 3, 10,000 words, The hidden bond and secret garden meetings. Episode 4, 8,000 words, The ceremony, conspiracy revealed, and war begins. Episode 5, 10,000 words, The transformation, epic battle, trial of traitors, coronation, and epilogue. Complete series word count, 39,000 words. Character arcs. AOE Era Sylvain, from Rejected Servant to Luna and Voice Walker. AOE Thane Darkbane, from Lonely King to Devoted Mate. AOE Ronan Shadowvale, from Heir to Exile, Redemption Possible. AOE Karen Blackthorn, from Schemer to Imprisoned Criminal. AOE Morrigan, from Antagonist to Imprisoned Remnant of the Past. Major themes. AOE. I love transcends status and hierarchy. AOE. True power comes from wisdom and compassion, not dominance. AOE. Everyone deserves a second chance, redemption. AOE. Identity and worth are not determined by external circumstances. AOE. Ancient bloodlines carry responsibility and purpose. AOE. The broken can become whole through connection and love. Hooks for future stories. Era's pregnancy and the child that will inherit both Alpha and Voice Walker powers. Other ancient bloodlines stirring in the world. Era's role as a bridge between different wolf societies. The possibilities of redemption for those who chose wrong. A world being transformed by one woman's choices. This is a complete, fully realized story with beginning, middle, end, epilogue, and multiple possible continuations. Perfect for a finished YouTube series that leaves viewers satisfied while also leaving room for sequels or spin-offs, ***. Perfect for YouTube storytelling channels, cinematic, emotional, romantic, with action, magic, intrigue, and a deeply satisfying conclusion. All episodes are ready for narration and video production. Yen Aoe.